What if everything you know about distance, silence, and emptiness is completely wrong, and the real truth is far more overwhelming than your mind is prepared to accept? Between Earth and Proxima Centauri, there is a space so vast that human imagination collapses before it even begins to understand it. It is not just far, it is not just empty. It is a kind of reality that ignores everything we call normal. No noise exists there. No direction feels meaningful. No presence can be confirmed. It is a place where even the idea of near and far starts to lose its meaning. And when the mind tries to picture it, it fails. Not because it is weak, but because the scale is too honest for human thinking. This is the kind of silence that does not comfort you. It does not feel peaceful. It feels alive in a strange way, as if the universe is watching without eyes, a silence so deep that it does not need sound to feel powerful. In that endless gap, even light becomes a slow traveler. It moves for years without stopping, without rest, without ever questioning its journey. And that raises a strange thought inside the human mind. If light itself must struggle through that distance, what chance does a human mind have to truly understand it? We live our lives trapped inside small problems, small fears, and small timelines. A single day feels long. A single failure feels heavy. A single delay feels painful. But in the space between Earth and Proxima Centauri, time does not care about human emotions. It continues forward without hesitation. Every second that passes on Earth is just a small echo compared to the massive stretch of time it takes to cross that void. And suddenly, human struggles start to feel different, not meaningless, but small enough to be reshaped. There is something unsettling about realizing how far 4.2 light years truly is. It is not just a number, it is a wall built from pure distance. A wall so large that even our fastest machines would take thousands of human lifetimes to cross it. When the mind tries to accept this, it begins to resist. It looks for shortcuts. It looks for comfort. But there are none. The universe does not offer shortcuts. It only offers truth, and truth is often uncomfortable. Yet inside this discomfort, something begins to change. Because when everything familiar disappears, awareness becomes sharper. You start to understand that emptiness is not really empty. It is full of possibility, full of unseen motion, full of silent forces that never stop working. Gravity bends it, radiation moves through it, particles drift through it like invisible thoughts. Nothing is truly still. Even the so-called void is alive with quiet activity. And in that realization, something strange happens inside the human mind. Fear begins to turn into curiosity. The same distance that once felt terrifying starts to feel like a challenge to understanding. Because if the universe can stretch this far without breaking, then maybe the human mind is also capable of stretching further than it believes. Maybe limits are not walls. Maybe they are illusions created by limited perspective. Most people will never think about this space. They will never feel the weight of it. They will never question what exists between stars that are separated by distances too large to measure in human emotions. But those who do, even for a moment, begin to see life differently. They begin to realize that everything meaningful requires distance, growth, delay, uncertainty. Just like light traveling across the void, progress in life often moves slowly, but it never stops moving. The silence between Earth and Proxima Centauri is not just a physical reality. It is a mirror. It reflects back the human condition. It shows how small we are, but also how far we are capable of thinking. And in that reflection, there is a quiet warning and a quiet promise at the same time. The warning is that the universe does not revolve around us. The promise is that we are still capable of understanding it. If you stay with this journey until the end, you will discover something most people never realize, not about space alone, but about your own mind. You will see how the same principles that govern the emptiness between stars also govern your thoughts, your discipline, and your ability to grow beyond limitations. Because the void is not just out there in space, it also exists inside every moment of doubt, every pause in progress, every time you feel like nothing is happening. And if you learn how to understand that silence instead of fearing it, you begin to unlock a different kind of strength, one that does not depend on speed, but on endurance across infinite distance. 4.2 light years is not just a measurement of space, it is a direct challenge to human perception itself. When you hear it, your mind tries to compress it into something familiar, something controllable, something that fits inside a human timeline. But it refuses to shrink. It stays massive, unbending, absolute. And in that resistance, something uncomfortable begins to form inside the mind. A realization that there are scales of existence that do not adjust to human comfort. Every attempt to understand this distance creates friction between imagination and reality. The mind wants patterns, edges, and limits it can hold on to. But here, there are none. Only continuation. Only extension without promise of arrival. Even the idea of travel starts to feel outdated, as if movement itself becomes irrelevant when the destination is wrapped in such extreme separation. And still, the universe continues without hesitation, as if this gap is normal, as if this level of isolation between 2 points is nothing unusual at all. This is where perception begins to fracture in a subtle way, not by breaking instantly, but by slowly losing confidence in its own authority. What once felt certain becomes questionable. What once felt large becomes relative. The human brain, which evolved to survive on a small planet, suddenly faces a structure of reality that refuses to fit its design. And instead of adjusting the universe, the mind is forced to adjust itself. In that adjustment, something unexpected appears, a strange form of mental pressure that does not come from danger, but from scale. It is not fear of being harmed. It is fear of being irrelevant in comparison to the structure of existence. Yet this pressure has a hidden function. It begins to strip away unnecessary mental noise. It removes illusions of control. It reveals how much of daily thought is built on assumptions that do not survive in larger contexts. And as those assumptions fall away, awareness becomes more precise. A person begins to notice how fragile attention really is, how easily it gets pulled into small disturbances, how quickly it forgets long-term direction. In contrast, the distance between stars holds a completely different behavior. It does not rush. It does not react. It simply maintains structure over unimaginable spans of time. There is a quiet discipline in that stability, one that feels almost superior to human urgency. This comparison creates an uncomfortable truth. Most mental exhaustion does not come from difficulty. It comes from misaligned focus. Energy is often spent on things that are close but temporary, while ignoring the larger trajectory of life. The void between worlds quietly exposes this imbalance. It shows that what feels important in the moment is often insignificant when viewed from a broader frame of existence. And yet, there is no judgment in this realization. The universe does not criticize human behavior. It simply reveals contrast. The emptiness between celestial bodies does not punish distraction. It just exists with unwavering consistency. That consistency becomes a silent lesson, not spoken, not taught, but felt. A reminder that endurance is not about intensity. It is about continuity without interruption. When the mind absorbs this idea, a subtle shift begins. The need for immediate results starts to weaken. The desire for fast validation loses some of its power. Instead, a deeper form of patience begins to form, not passive waiting, but active persistence across uncertainty. The kind of mindset that continues even when feedback is absent, even when progress cannot be measured, even when the path ahead cannot be seen clearly. This is where the deeper transformation begins. Because once a person understands that even light requires years to cross cosmic separation, they start to reconsider their own timeline. They begin to question why they expect instant change in a reality that is built on slow unfolding. The universe does not rush its processes. Galaxies do not form overnight. Systems do not align instantly. Everything meaningful takes time that feels excessive from a human point of view, but that excessive time is not wasted. It is necessary structure. It is the condition under which complexity becomes possible. Without delay, nothing stabilizes. Without distance, nothing develops depth. And without resistance, nothing gains strength. The void between Earth and Proxima Centauri quietly enforces this principle without ever stating it. It simply demonstrates it through scale. There is also a strange emotional reversal that begins to form here. What once felt like emptiness starts to feel like architecture, not empty space, but organized separation, a system where distance is not absence, but function. This changes the way perception interprets struggle, because if space itself uses distance to maintain structure, then perhaps human struggle also has a hidden function. Perhaps difficulty is not a sign of failure, but a requirement for internal expansion. This thought does not provide comfort in the usual sense. It does not remove difficulty. Instead, it reframes it. And that reframing is more powerful than relief. It turns confusion into structure. It turns pressure into signal. It turns isolation into context. As this understanding deepens, the mind begins to loosen its attachment to immediate certainty. It becomes more tolerant of ambiguity, more willing to exist without answers. And in that state, something rare emerges, a form of mental clarity that does not depend on control, but on acceptance of scale beyond comprehension. The space between stars, when fully considered, does not make a person feel smaller in a destructive way. It makes the mind more precise, more selective, more aware of what deserves energy and what does not. And in that awareness, a quiet strength begins to form, one that is not loud, not emotional, not reactive, but steady. Like a distant signal traveling across impossible distance, still intact after years of uninterrupted journey. If separation across cosmic scale reshapes perception, then the next question becomes even more unsettling. What happens when the medium between worlds is not just extended, but actively distorted by forces that bend reality itself? Because between a blue planet and a distant red dwarf system, nothing travels in a straight certainty. Not energy, not information, not even time as it is experienced in human thought. Everything is influenced by invisible architecture that behaves more like intentionless design than empty expansion. Out there, space is not uniform. It is layered with fields that stretch and compress existence in ways no instinct can naturally predict. Gravity does not simply pull objects together, it reshapes pathways. It bends trajectories so subtly that motion becomes something closer to negotiation than travel. A drifting object is never truly independent. It is always responding to unseen gradients, adjusting its path without awareness. And this creates a deeper lesson about influence that most minds overlook in daily life. Human thinking often assumes direct cause and effect. Effort in one direction leads to result in the same direction. But in larger frameworks, outcomes are rarely linear. They are curved by interference, delayed by resistance, and redirected by forces that were never visible at the starting point. Just as radiation spreads through interstellar regions, scattering and shifting as it encounters particles and magnetic structures, intention in life often disperses through complexity before it reaches anything resembling completion. This is where a different kind of awareness begins to form, a recognition that progress is not a straight line, but a warped pathway shaped by conditions beyond immediate control. And instead of resisting this, advanced understanding begins to observe it, to study it, to adapt to it. Because in deep space, survival is not about force. It is about reading patterns that cannot be seen directly, only inferred through subtle change. There is also a phenomenon that stretches comprehension even further. Signals sent across interstellar distance do not arrive as they were emitted. They arrive transformed by time itself. By the moment they reach their destination, the source has already changed, evolved, or disappeared entirely. Communication becomes a delayed echo of reality, not a direct reflection of it. And this creates a strange psychological mirror for human experience. Many thoughts, decisions, and emotional reactions behave in the same way. What is felt in one moment is often a response to conditions that no longer exist. Reactions arrive late, shaped by internal echoes rather than present truth. And yet, most minds treat these delayed signals as immediate reality. This creates confusion, unnecessary urgency, and distorted interpretation of current situations. But when viewed through a broader cosmic lens, this delay is not a flaw. It is a feature of complex systems. Even light from distant stars shows history, not present state. It tells stories from moments that may no longer exist in their original form. Yet those stories are still meaningful, still informative, still capable of guiding understanding across unimaginable spans of separation. At a deeper level, this suggests something powerful about human awareness. Consciousness is not always aligned with the present moment. It is layered with remnants of past experiences, predictions of future possibilities, and interpretations that overlap like gravitational waves passing through the fabric of thought. Most internal conflict does not come from reality itself, but from overlapping time layers within perception. And just as cosmic dust slowly accumulates to form new structures under persistent influence, human identity is formed through accumulation of repeated impressions. Small experiences, unnoticed moments, and subtle shifts in attention gather over time until they create something stable enough to be recognized as self. Yet stability does not mean permanence. It simply means temporary coherence in a constantly shifting environment. In interstellar regions, matter does not remain still. It drifts, collides, reorganizes, and sometimes collapses into entirely new formations under pressure. What appears empty is actually active transformation on a scale too slow for direct observation. This introduces a critical realization. Lack of visible change does not equal absence of development. It often means processes are occurring beneath perception thresholds. This principle applies strongly to internal growth. Many assume progress must always be visible to be real, but large systems rarely operate that way. Deep transformation often happens below awareness, where patterns are restructured before outcomes become noticeable. The absence of immediate evidence does not indicate failure. It may indicate integration is still occurring within unseen layers of cognition. As understanding expands in this direction, a subtle shift occurs in how difficulty is interpreted. Resistance is no longer seen as obstruction, but as interaction with complex structure. Pressure becomes feedback from environment, not punishment from circumstance. Even confusion begins to serve a function, revealing where perception is still too narrow to interpret broader context. And in this expanded awareness, another truth emerges. No object in space moves in isolation. Every trajectory is influenced by surrounding fields, distant masses, and historical momentum. Even systems that appear independent are part of larger relational networks that extend far beyond immediate visibility. This reframes the idea of personal struggle. It is not isolated burden. It is participation in a wider system of movement and adjustment. When this perspective settles, urgency begins to lose dominance, not because action becomes less important, but because interpretation becomes more accurate. There is less panic and delay, less distortion in uncertainty, and less confusion in complexity. The mind starts to recognize that not everything requiring attention demands immediate reaction. Instead, a quieter intelligence forms, one that observes longer patterns rather than short impulses, one that waits for alignment instead of forcing direction, one that understands that even across vast separation, influence still travels, just not in the way urgency expects. It moves through delay, through distortion, through transformation, until it eventually becomes something entirely new at arrival. And within that realization lies a powerful shift. If even cosmic signals cannot escape alteration across distance, then perhaps human experience is not meant to remain unchanged either. Perhaps evolution requires distortion. Perhaps understanding requires delay. And perhaps strength is not the absence of interference, but the ability to remain coherent while passing through it. When influence itself becomes distorted across cosmic scale, a deeper question begins to rise beneath the surface of thought. What does stability even mean in a reality where nothing remains fixed for long? Because in the regions between star systems, there is no permanent stillness. There is only temporary balance between opposing forces that constantly reshape each other. What looks like calm is actually tension held in perfect suspension. In that environment, matter does not rest. It negotiates with pressure. It adjusts to radiation. It responds to invisible currents that never announce their presence. Even the most isolated particles are part of an ongoing conversation with the structure around them. Nothing exists in full independence. Everything is participating in a silent exchange of influence that stretches across unimaginable scale. This introduces a shift in how control is understood. On a planetary surface, control feels like the ability to decide outcomes directly. But in wider systems, control is less about direction and more about alignment. Objects do not force paths, they adapt to conditions that already exist. Movement becomes less about command and more about compatibility with surrounding reality, and this changes how action itself should be interpreted. Human effort is often imagined as a straight projection of will: push harder, move faster, achieve sooner. But large scale systems reveal a different principle. Excess force without alignment leads to fragmentation. Energy spreads too thin, loses coherence, and fails to produce meaningful change. In contrast, smaller, consistent adjustments, aligned with underlying structure, create more lasting transformation. It is not intensity that determines outcome, but resonance with conditions. This is visible across cosmic formations. Nebulae do not assemble through sudden intervention. They accumulate through slow interaction of pressure, density, and attraction. Over immense spans of time, subtle variations accumulate until structure emerges naturally. What appears as sudden formation is actually the result of prolonged invisible preparation. Nothing arrives without a long prehistory of adjustment. From this perspective, impatience appears not as urgency, but as mismatch with scale. The expectation for immediate outcome conflicts with the nature of processes that require expansion before manifestation. This mismatch creates internal friction. Not because progress is absent, but because perception is calibrated to shorter cycles than reality operates on. As awareness adjusts, a new sensitivity develops. It becomes easier to recognize when effort is misaligned with timing, when action is premature, when pressure is applied before structure is ready to support it. And this recognition does not reduce ambition, it refines it. It shifts focus from forcing results to preparing conditions where results can naturally appear. In deep interstellar regions, energy does not disappear. It disperses. It spreads across vast areas until it becomes indistinguishable from background activity. Yet it still exists, still influences, still participates in the overall balance of the system. This teaches a subtle but important principle. Lack of immediate impact does not equal absence of effect. Influence can be delayed, diluted, or diffused, yet still remain active within the larger framework. Many internal struggles follow the same pattern. Effort is applied, but visible change does not appear quickly. This often leads to doubt. But doubt is usually a reaction to limited observation range, not actual absence of development. Just as distant light may take years to reach a point of visibility, internal restructuring often requires extended periods before results become recognizable. Within this delay, something important is forming, not stagnation, but integration. Information, experience, and repetition are being absorbed into deeper layers of understanding. What feels like stillness is often reorganization at a level too subtle for immediate detection. Systems are not idle, they are recalibrating. And just as cosmic structures maintain balance through constant micro adjustments, human stability is also maintained through continuous internal recalibration. Thoughts shift slightly, emotions fluctuate subtly, perspectives evolve gradually. None of this is dramatic in isolation, but together they create the foundation of change that eventually becomes visible. There is also a deeper implication hidden within this structure. If everything in existence relies on adaptation rather than fixed control, then rigidity becomes a disadvantage. Systems that cannot adjust eventually fracture under sustained pressure. Flexibility is not weakness. It is the mechanism that allows continuity under changing conditions. This reframes struggle once again. Difficulty is not a signal to stop movement, it is a signal to adjust orientation. When resistance appears, it is often indicating that current approach is not synchronized with surrounding conditions. The solution is not always greater force, but better calibration. In the vast space between stellar systems, nothing survives by resisting environment. Survival depends on reading subtle shifts and responding accordingly. Even trajectories of massive bodies are shaped by long-term gravitational interactions that guide rather than command motion. Influence is distributed, not centralized. Direction is emergent, not imposed. When this principle is applied inwardly, a different kind of strength begins to develop. Not the strength of overpowering resistance, but the strength of sustained adaptability. The ability to remain functional while conditions change without warning. The ability to continue movement even when certainty disappears. The ability to adjust without losing identity in the process. And this brings a final realization within this layer of understanding. Stability is not the absence of change. It is the ability to maintain coherence while change is happening continuously. Just as cosmic systems remain structured, despite constant motion, human awareness can remain grounded even while internal and external conditions shift endlessly. From this perspective, nothing is truly wasted. Every delay contributes to structure. Every interruption contributes to recalibration. Every period of uncertainty contributes to refinement. What appears as inefficiency from a narrow viewpoint becomes essential architecture when seen across extended scale. And in that expanded recognition, pressure transforms again, not into burden, but into participation in a system that is always adjusting, always balancing, always evolving toward new configurations that could not exist without motion through uncertainty itself.